Hi, this is Amanda de Cadenet, and I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to me and the conversations I'm having, and most importantly, if you want to support this podcast, the best way for you to do it is to sign up for my Substack. That is where I share the more personal lessons I'm learning, extra wisdom from my guests, plus the tools I'm gathering from the various teachers in my life. The way you get access to all of this is by heading over to www.amandadecadenet.substack.com and just sign up. Put your email in. It's totally free. So head over to www.amandadecadenet.substack.com. Hello and welcome to the conversation. My guests this week are two extraordinary women, Alexandra and Sjanie Wurlitzer. They are the founders of the Red School. They have written a book called Wise Power, Discover the Liberating Power of Menopause to Awaken Authority, Purpose, and Belonging, which sounds really good to me. I was given this book by a friend about a year ago, and it has been the only book I have read which talks about the spiritual and emotional aspects of menopause and reframes perimenopause and menopause in a way that I have found phenomenally helpful. I am really excited to talk to them, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, Sjanie. Hi, Alexandra. Thank you so much for doing this. I got given your book, Wise Power, Discover the Liberating Power of Menopause to Awaken Authority, Purpose, and Belonging, by a friend of mine about 6 months ago, maybe longer. I've given it to so many people. I want you to know that because it truly is the only book of its kind that I have found that looks at menopause through a lens that is hopeful and uplifting. So first of all, perhaps you could just give our listeners a little background about the Red School.
Well, Alexandra and I, we began working together about 16 years ago now. But actually, the story goes back to way before me, when Alexandra was in her 30s and experienced severe menstrual pain. That really was the beginning of the discovery of all the work that we teach together. But since we've been working together, it became really clear to us that the things that we were noticing about the menstrual cycle and the menstrual cycle experience go way beyond the biological conversation that most people are having about what it means to be in a menstruating body, what it means to be a cyclical being. And we started working together, running workshops, courses, having conversations with hundreds of thousands of people to really get inside what the psychological and emotional experience is of having a menstrual cycle, of being rhythmic, of being cyclical. And through all these conversations and through a lot of creative work that Alexandra and I have been doing together, not to also mention our own experiences of the menstrual cycle, we began to piece together this language and description of what we now call the spiritual architecture of women, which is, of course, the spiritual architecture of anybody who has a menstrual cycle. And we gave name and language to the archetypal process that we're held in through the menstrual month. And we've described a number of maps in that book, Wild Power, that really orientate people towards the different experiences that we have in each of the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. So that really was the kind of groundswell of what we were teaching. And we created Red School to have a place where we could educate and keep evolving and understanding what we call menstrual cycle awareness. And then, of course, the next piece of that conversation, what happens when we no longer menstruate, which is where the menopause piece comes in. And again, that's something we've been tracking for many years, and then finally put it together in our book, Wise Power. So that's the other piece of what we're offering at Red School. So Red School is really, I would say, the only place on the planet where you can come and learn about the psychological, emotional, and spiritual powers of menstruality. So that's the whole process of living in a cyclical body from menarche, your first bleed, right the way through to menopause, and what that means then for postmenopause life. So we're doing some very exciting, pioneering work.
It's extraordinary. And is Red School in person or is it online?
It's a virtual space. Yeah, because we wanted to reach as many people as possible. We do run in-person events, but all of our courses are offered online, and we have longer trainings of 12 weeks. We have shorter courses of 6 weeks. We've got self-study programs. We've got a whole curriculum.
Wow.
You could do a PhD in menstruality.
When you looked at why were you experiencing pain during menstruation, what did that uncover for you?
Well, having pain, it's very interesting. So when the pain struck me, it was insane. It was off the Richter scale and would last for 3, sometimes 4 days. And I was not into drugs or surgery, although I'm very grateful those things exist. I did not want to go that path. I said, my body is speaking to me and I'm going to listen. And so what that meant was I had to give space to menstruation because I just did not want to pop painkillers every month. And I thought, I'm going to face this pain. I'm going to go into it. Well, at first, it was a blast of pain and it was hell. It's a long and deep story, Amanda, but I held my nerve with just facing into it. And month after month, it was like the scales falling from my eyes. And of course, I was doing lots of natural health healing practices, diet and so on. But by giving space to myself at menstruation, I was actually reducing stress. And this was reducing symptoms. But it opened up this inner world. And with time, it was almost like menstruation was going, darling, I've got a story for you and I just can't reach you, because the whole cultural number is ignore your menstruation, ignore it, just keep going. Over time, it was like then the goodness of menstruation could come through. And I started to experience more amplified states of consciousness, more expanded states of consciousness. I could get very high when I bled. It was like being on drugs.
Is that because of going into the pain body?
Well, yes, initially it would be the endorphins released from feeling the pain. But I also had this extraordinary insight that started coming to me. It was in creating that space in my psyche. It was as though I opened a capacity to know something more about this process. And as the symptoms decreased, and it did take time, I'm not saying this happened overnight, I really started to feel the benefits of menstruation. The moment I let go, as the bleed started and I let go, I could feel this deep surrender happening in my being. It was like this oxytocin washed through me, which is the love and bliss hormone. And I started to experience these beautiful states of love and bliss and real ecstasy. But actually, it was more like knowing.
Just an intuitive feeling in your body.
That's right. That was really profound about who I am. And creative ideas would pour in. I would just be filled with ideas. I just really want to emphasize this did take time because I had to work through more of the pain first.
And that sounds like you were very young as well. To be able to have that knowing that that was what you needed to do speaks to probably how connected you actually are to yourself and your body.
Just to say something about Alexandra's story, pain was her cause to stop. But actually, when she stopped at menstruation, that really was the early prototype of what we now call menstrual cycle awareness, which very simply is this act of listening and responding to one's body and one's changing rhythm. And at menstruation, there is a natural need for us to slow down, retreat, and stop. And when Alexandra did that, what happened was she tapped into the power of menstruation. And there are powers in each of the phases of the menstrual cycle, but the menstrual powers have been so misunderstood and we've been so disconnected from them. So what Alexandra is describing here, this altered state of consciousness, being in a state of bliss, ecstasy, having vision, intuition, is something that everyone can experience when they stop at menstruation. It's that simple.
It's interesting because I have a teenage daughter who has endometriosis, which is why I was asking you about the pain, because I can see for her that her period is something that just she braces herself for it. It's so hard to find something positive about extremely painful periods. And it is also equally difficult to find positive and hopeful things about perimenopause because the suffering is often great emotionally, spiritually. And so that is why I was so fascinated by your book, just to bring it back to that, because it really has a lens that helped me and many women who I gave the book to shift the perspective on what is happening to us. So let's talk about Wise Power. Why did you write this book? And what do you hope that people will take away from it?
This book wanted to be written, Amanda. It was tormenting me morning and night.
Yeah, as they do.
As they do. We had been, Sjanie and I together, doing workshops in person and then online course for a number of years. And it was sort of data gathering because the more I taught, the more I could hear the story that we now illuminate in Wise Power coming through these women. And I suppose there was a moment of almost ripeness where something just went click.
You got the download, all the dots connected.
I was feeling some very strong feelings when you asked that question, because I realized that this time of menopause is such a precarious time in our life and in our life process and in our developmental process. And it's such a significant time. And to date, it has either been ignored and not spoken about as if there's nothing happening, or it's been described in terms of a health crisis, as if there is a design flaw in our bodies and that everything's falling apart and going wrong and that this is the end. And also, there's been this kind of cultural overlay, which is that basically once you get to menopause, you are irrelevant, you're becoming old, and you sort of are no longer a significant contributor to the global conversation. And we felt so strongly that there needed to be at least one voice out there, and now there are going to be millions, but at least one voice out there who was putting menopause in a context which showed that it is not a design flaw, that it's a very natural, organic part of our development. And in fact, it is this portal, this initiation, that if we are held through it and if we understand what's happening, it can be the catalyst for such an unleashing of power and such a liberation of who we are. And that postmenopausal women can be the most kick-ass, fierce, don't mess with me humans on the planet. And they are by far not irrelevant. In fact, we think that they should be running the world. So if menopause is dignified and if this deeper process and the psychological process is understood, there's much more chance that those of us going through menopause are going to come out the other side intact, with dignity, and really in our authority. So that was what we wanted. And having said all that, you can probably hear that this process of menopause is a huge undoing. It's a death and a rebirth. That's what makes it initiatory. In terms of your identity, your ego, who you are, the life you've lived, you die to all of that in order that you can really come back to something essential about you and be kind of rebirthed anew into the the third act of your life. So that's really important to know, that it's not the end. It is a death and rebirth. It's the end of one cycle and the beginning of a whole new chapter.
Oh, Sjanie,
Yes.
I am on board with this.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I would love for you to talk a little bit about the different phases of menopause, because I've had such fun reading those and being like, oh, what stage are you in? What stage am I in?
So it's that death and rebirth, the stages, the phases of this initiation. The first phase is the toughest and possibly the longest. And actually, what happens here is things start to go ping, and, it's like those screws suddenly pinging out from somewhere when things start to break down. It feels like, oh, suddenly your energy goes, you're losing interest in what you do, your beloved partner that you love doesn't look quite so lovable anymore. And even your children that you adore, frankly, you'd love them to leave home now almost. Just like, can you just go and do something else now? Yes,
Can everyone just leave me alone?
Yes, can you just leave me alone? This is the base note of this first phase that we call betrayal. And it is this desire to pull away from the world. And so when that goes, when we lose our interest in that, it's like, well, what's it all about? Who am I? And so those big existential questions are now on steroids. So it feels like you're actually going through an ego death. And this is the ego death moment. And this is the most dangerous moment in menopause. If you've been a real people pleaser, you've been very dependent on other people for your affirmation of who you are, very dependent on your identity in a particular role you play, this ego death can be quite shocking. And the thing I just really want to name here is, at this point, at this age, suicides can increase at this time. And by the way, we know people and know of people who have taken their lives. And we believe that it is the lack of understanding and the lack of support around this ego death moment.
All of the discomfort in you and in your life is made visible. It's like that's all you can see is what's wrong about you and the world and your life. So that can be hugely anxiety provoking, depressing, you feeling hopeless. That's what's taking you into the underworld.
When I was listening to you, Alexandra, I was relating, because that is exactly what happened to me. And why I feel so strongly about having these conversations now, I'm through that, is because now I'm into another phase, because I didn't know what was happening to me. And when you talk about the suicide rates for women, as you touched on, is the highest during this stage of life. And you're right, we lose many women. I've been interviewing women for 20 years. Not one woman has ever spoken about menopause. Not one. That to me is shocking.
Yeah.
And it speaks to some of the points that you raised, Sjanie, about our culture and the lack of value for women who age out. We live in a very ageist culture. Had I have known what was going on, I would have felt a little safer. A lot of women don't have great support, and I would love for that to change.
Oh my God, would we ever? Because in a way, that's the missing piece that could help really transform this first phase. Because if one is more resourced, you see, menopause is actually guiding you. These phases are meaningful, and that need to just walk away from everything is actually what you need. That is menopause going, you've got to step away from your life now, because you've got to go in and rethink who you are, to really discover who you truly are. And to do that, you've just got to step away from all the roles you've been playing and find yourself again, and tend to your baggage, tend to your shadow, tend to your wounds, because you have a whole new life waiting for you post-menopause. And you do not want to go into that post-menopause life carrying all this baggage. Menopause is actually trying to liberate you to find your true self.
Yeah, which, as we know, is no easy task, and people spend their lives avoiding themselves. You've probably heard about probiotics and the importance of a healthy gut microbiome. Well, I've got some news for you. Over 15 years of research on the vaginal microbiome have revealed that our gut isn't the only part of our body that thrives on an optimal microbiome. For years, Seed has been my go-to for improving my family's gut health, so I'm excited that Seed has launched VSO1 Vaginal Symbiotic. Your period, exercise, diet, sex, this can all mess with your vaginal microbiome, making it sensitive to imbalances and unwanted, uncomfortable issues. And I don't need to tell you that there's nothing worse than feeling like something is off with your vagina. That's why I'm so into Seed's VSO1. It's the first vaginal probiotic suppository designed to nourish your vagina with the essential biome it needs to flourish. I've read the research and I've interviewed the scientists behind VSO1, and I've decided to give my vagina the attention she deserves. If you want to check it out, please go to seed.com/Amanda C and use 25 Amanda C for 25% off your first month supply of Seed. I want to move on to the next phase. What is the next one?
Well, the next phase is what we call repair. And it's these two together that really create the magic ultimately for what unfolds. So repair is learning to just let go, to dare to trust, to let go. And then repair is about you starting to do the inner work. It's actually taking care of your physical health. There's just a ton of stuff to do for your physical health. And it is, so what you need in the repair phase is to be able to dial down as much as you can your outer commitments. So we have this lovely phrase, snudging. You're going to practice snudging it, which means you do as little as possible to get away with things. You look like you're ticking all the boxes. No one can argue with you, except that you have cut away all the fat right down to just the bare bones of what you have to do. And that is the most important thing you have to do now, is to minimize outer responsibilities. And the good thing about menopause is you'll find it so easy to say no to things once you've accepted the fact you're in menopause. So it's creating this time and space for yourself as much as you can. And the moment we have time and space, something happens in our psyches. It's something wakes up. It's extraordinary. You suddenly have thoughts about things. You go, oh my God, oh, I've got to do that. Oh no, I can't do that anymore. That's what I want to do. These ideas start to pop. But for that to happen, you do need a time of utter nothingness where you feel brain dead. You feel like you just don't want to know. You just want to sit and stare out the window.
So I've done for 18 months and I've just, about 3 weeks ago, I popped up again.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
it's wild.
It's wild.
I'm like, oh, I'm back.
I love the image of the caterpillar going into the cocoon, because that's exactly what's happening here at menopause. The death is like you leave the shape, the identity that you were. Now, that's that first phase. And the second phase of repair is where you go to mush, where the caterpillar completely disintegrates. It's such a process of surrender where you drop agency, you drop effort. It's really about rest and doing nothing, because it's in that cellular soup. These new vaginal cells start to spark, just as what's happened to you, which then brings us on to the next phase. Like magic.
the more you stay with it, honestly, the more something can start to happen, because it's just the power of rest.
I know. And it's probably, for me, it's the first time since I'm 15 years old that I rested, and I had no choice. And now I'm like, well, I won't ever go back to doing what I was doing because I really like the new pace. So what's the next phase?
Well, as you rest, as you hang out, as you said, this feeling of suddenly popping out, what happens is ideas really start to pop. And in a really big way, it's like a visioning. It's like, oh, wow, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. And we call it revelation. It's a revelation about who you are, Amanda. It's extraordinary how it happens. I remember it happening. I was walking down the street and slapping my forehead and going, oh my God, this is who I am. It was just the utter recognition of my nature. And, what I was naming to myself was not unfamiliar to me. This was the irony. But it was like, it was like I was seeing it for the first time, but it just something imprints. So what happens in the revelation phase is you're discovering who you really are. And this is the really important bit. You are saying yes to it. And you've got now this careless attitude, actually. And it's such a relief. And that affirmation of self in that moment is such a turning point. The lights start to turn on, you suddenly recognizing who you are. And that's the beginning of the coming out of menopause. But you are still deep in something. You can't push here. You can't rush anything. You have to take your time. Normal life is going on. You're turning up, you're doing things. But actually, your inner world is so much more important. And it's like you're courting something on the inside. And you need time and space for that courting. It can't be rushed. It's delicate. You need time for the ideas that are sprouting to take more shape, to have more substantiality. And you're sort of growing into the possibility of these ideas, because often the ideas that come to you require a complete reworking of your life.
I think that's what people are avoiding as well, because that takes time, commitment, finances, sometimes emotional discarding, literal clearing. I mean, I've been like clearing out my house, clearing out people, getting rid of clothes.
We're talking about this great house clean of menopause. And what Alexandra's been describing there with this third phase of revelation is like a whole renewed connection to yourself. But it's yourself without the baggage, without all the societal pressure. It's this reconnection to something really deeply true and essential about you that you, I want to say, fall in love with as a mother would with a newborn child. There's that like very sweet coming back to yourself thing that happens there. And because you have this very new, true connection to yourself, and a lot of the noise has fallen away, this next phase of visioning is really, you've set the fertile ground for it, because now you're in the flow of who you are. You're really connected to yourself at the deepest level. And so you become, I want to say, a lightning rod for life to reach you and for your calling to find you. And this is where women in menopause wake up and go, right, this is what I'm going to give to the world. This is who I am, and this is what I've got to give. And a sense of purpose and contribution and a real feeling of I matter and my voice matters. And I want to use what I've got to make a real difference in the world with whatever time I have left. So that visioning piece is really about a landing inside this calling and what you're about. And that might not be entirely new. It might be the upgrade or an update on what you've been doing in your life thus far, or it might be something entirely new. I'm recalling we had a brilliant conversation with Lynn Twist, who you may know of. She's an author and she was a founder of the Hunger Project and has done amazing work in the world. But when she hit menopause, so this is a woman with great purpose and a great calling. And when she hit menopause, she had a revisioning of what her life was about and really stepped into a whole nother gear of supporting and serving life. And it was very much around the restoration of the rainforest and really protecting the Amazon.
I had a mission from a young age to advocate for women. And I've been doing that for my whole career in various ways. And when I hit perimenopause, I suddenly went, I don't know that I want to do that anymore. I feel like I've contributed. I've really made a difference in significant ways. And I'm good with handing the baton off to these amazing other people who are doing phenomenal work. I don't think I can really be of service there anymore. And that was shocking to me. That was shocking. It was like, wow, now what motivates me? And you know what? I don't really know at this point. I don't know. But I'm following the threads of what resonates and what inspires me. And by the way, when I look at my interviews, they've completely changed. I'm speaking to women like yourself about things that I haven't spoken about before, because that's where I feel drawn to that space. So I completely relate to Lynn Twist, and I'm sure so many thousands of other women who have this experience. And my girlfriends who are also, some of them are very established in their fields, are also going, hang on a minute, is this me? So let's get on to the next phase. What's the next one?
The fifth phase. Yeah.
Yes. So the fifth phase we call emergence. And you are now starting to come out of the chrysalis. So when you're in menopause, there's a real sense of being held in something. People have spoken about being sort of looking at the world from underwater. You're just not in it. Well, now you are negotiating that film you've had around you. You're just starting to feel your way through it and make tentative steps out into the world. There's a tenderness and vulnerability about the emergence phase. So you will feel vulnerable. You may feel a bit exposed, but it's like being a sort of a teenager again, really.
Yeah, you see, you're all brand new. You're coming back to the world, but you aren't the same as the person you were. You've really been through something. And as you said, you might have walked away from your previous career or the life you had. You're re-emerging back into the world in a really new shape and form, and one that is much more you, actually, much more true, less masked, less armored, less concerned about what others think, and much more really about what matters to you. But that takes time to feel really kind of steady and stable in that, much like coming into young adulthood. You don't really know who you are for quite a while. It's not like you rock up in your 20s and you feel comfortable in your own skin. All of that stuff takes time. There's a bit of that going on in postmenopause too. But then by the time you get to Alexandra's age, I mean, look at her. See, that's, rocking it.
Inspirational. How old are you, Alexandra?
Oh, I'm 71. And I honestly have never been more creative or more productive and more effective in my life than I am now. I have to be very careful and disciplined around my energy. My self-care is absolutely non-negotiable. I have fierce boundaries, which Sjanie knows about. Everyone at Red School knows about. And if I tend to all that, I'm just really in the river of who I am and my calling and creativity. It really feels like liberation.
That is so hopeful. Obviously, in each one of these phases, there is a lot of work to be done. External, physical, and also internal, spiritual, emotional. What are some of the things that universally you can say, here are some of the tools that can help you navigate through these different phases?
So we put together this list of guidelines for the menopause initiation. And I think we outlined 10 or 11 things in there that are really simple, practical tools that can support you to have a very different kind of experience through menopause. I mean, one of the first ones I'm thinking of is rest.
I know. That is absolutely top of my list, is to do whatever it takes to get a little more time and space for yourself, to do nothing, just to hang out with yourself. Empty time and space with no agenda and no responsibilities. I don't care if it's only half an hour, but that, I would say, is my top priority. You know, the top thing I would say to women is to take that space for yourself. Half an hour, 15 minutes, I don't care. You turn off your mobile, you step away from technology, and you stare into space and you just let yourself be. That starts to catalyze things. But there are just lots of really simple things like, well, we mentioned this art of snudging, you know, do less. Do less. Lower your standards. Your standards have probably been so fiercely high. Lower your standards. Hand over responsibilities to others. You are changing, which means everyone else has to change. They've got to evolve around you. Children have to pick up the slack more. You know, you've been carrying things for everybody, probably, including partners. And you are now withdrawing your services to some extent.
They don't like it.
They do not.
There is a backlash going on.
Yes.
As we like to say, it's inviting them to grow up too. And that's good for the whole system, even as people don't like it. It's important for everyone that everyone gets to grow up. I'll add to our list of tips here by just talking about ambition and goals, because if you've been somebody who's really lived an ambitious life and been very goal orientated and achieved a lot, through these years of menopause, really drop your goals for a while. Don't make ambitious plans. Don't have anything that you have to push yourself towards. Go on doing stuff, go on creating, but don't put yourself under pressure, because pressure really messes with this whole process. It adds stress to the system, and the more stress you have, the more intense the psychological, emotional, and physical experience will be. So I really recommend just kind of dropping ambition and goals for a while. And part of that is dropping perfectionism as well. Just doing only the essentials and just only what you have to, only what you can get away with, basically. Do the bare minimum. I mean, isn't that great permission? I think we should all have that written on a little slip. Yeah.
Really helpful. And as you said, there's a lot more in the book. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy, for anyone that does not know what that means. What are your thoughts on that?
We get asked this a lot. So firstly, I have to say, we are not medical practitioners and we don't advise anything here. We are not personally fans of synthetic hormones or hormonal replacement therapy. I didn't use it. My feeling is that, as with all medical drugs, I'm very grateful they exist where it seems like nothing else is working. In a way, we're all flocking to HRT because we have not been properly prepared for menopause. We haven't known what was needed to take care of our health and our emotional life to meet menopause. And also, we may not have had the resources to do all those things. That's another huge thing.
Huge. I was going to say that. Self-care at the level that we're talking about for many people is just not available. They cannot take the rest. They cannot take the space. They cannot drop the ambition. They cannot delegate because there's no one to delegate to. that's a very real consideration. So yeah, I mean, I've really been paying attention to how possible it is for people to give themselves what they need. Most people cannot. And
They can't, no.
financial limitations, life
Yes.
circumstances.
Which is very distressing and concerning. That is the case. And so, we give thanks that there are things like HRT that can seemingly help in the moment. But what I do say to those women is take the HRT and you start to feel better and hopefully have a bit more energy or sleeping better or whatever it is, that you actually start to look at what other things you can do to support yourself. So it's not about taking HRT instead of doing the other stuff, but to use it to support you, to not abandon the idea of taking more time and space for yourself. And we're very big on the 1% change. It's like 1% more than before, just giving to yourself, taking something for yourself. And the moment you give yourself permission for that and to be able to say, I deserve this space. I deserve to take time for myself. You see, many don't feel that, and that's part of the problem. So there's a shift that could happen, whether you're taking HRT or not. That's something you can do.
You're suggesting to not use the HRT to mask the natural process and the gifts that the process of perimenopause and menopause are here to give us. Use it as one of the tools to allow for this process.
Yeah. The conversation I would like to see happen or change is, at the moment, menopause is seen as a health crisis and a design flaw, and that HRT is the medication to remedy that. But really, the deeper truth is that it is an organic, cyclical process, and it's the ending of a big cycle, which looks like the loss of energy, the revealing of underlying health issues, and so on. That whole process is normal, natural, and as it's meant to be, in order that we can be renewed, reborn, in order that we can actually heal, so that we can step into this new part of our life in a much better state. And I would really love people to have that information so that they can start to see that what's happening to them is actually okay. And it's actually fine to have brain fog for a while or to feel really tired and exhausted for a while. You don't have to fix that. It's a call to rest. It's a call to change gears. I think that's the main thing that I'm concerned about, is that people are using HRT in order not to change. And actually the change is really necessary and healthy. So in those cases, I would really encourage people to trust what's happening with menopause. As Alexandra said earlier on, it's a very powerful process that is guiding you in such a deep way and going to deliver you to a very good place in yourself if you can stick with it, if you can dare to trust it.
Well, I am so grateful that you have written this book. I cannot thank you enough. I hope that people listening will read it, because it has been an immense support and continues to be. And it's a book that I go back to, and it's been really wonderful to share the work you're doing with my listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I really appreciate you. I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important, the work that you're doing. I really do. And you're somewhat of a singular voice, both of you. We need to elevate this information. So my listeners can find out about your online course on your website.
It is actually redschool.net.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. Very much appreciated.